then surely we must think of those other caves where figures, not hands, are drawn. And figures, and I think it may be Lascaux or maybe Pechmel, drawn as though they're laughing. Of course, Georges Bataille wrote at length about these figures particularly, because in his writing he would like to construct an idea that the first humans drew figures in the face of animals on the cave walls. Because, Bataille says, humans wanted to figure the human as some form of waste, some form of abandoned waste at the edge of a predominantly animal universe. So Bataille's view would be that the figure is drawn, the laughing figure particularly, the famous stick figure with a mouth wide open and an erect penis, that this figure is laughing in shame. They're laughing in shame and figured in this way because they're about to abandon their animality in the hunt. This is his fantasy, clearly. He's only guessing, this being prehistoric, so pre-writing in a form we might understand it. So the abandonment for Bataille of the figure in the cave is perhaps one that is related to Joe's and Marie-José's compassionate figure, but perhaps is the inevitable other of that figure. And then Joe said something about the taciturn. That really brought me up quickly. Is there a translation in the room of taciturn? Bojana, what is this?
I see.
It's very English. It's silent.
Is that a Dutch translation?
The Zwerg, it's the Willem the Zwerg. It's Willem the Packager.
And what would it mean to be able to translate it in that way? Taciturn means to be what?
Not talk.
To not to talk.
English is that. Yeah, to keep your mouth shut.
To keep your mouth shut, yes.
Or to hold one's peace. Yeah.
To hold one's peace.
Yeah.
Okay, so Walter Benjamin writing to Florence Christian Rang in the 1930s, I think, maybe late 1920s as a student, wrote about a thing called the taciturn night. He described the night to his friend Florence Christian Rang as taciturn. So he must imply here a night that somehow doesn't speak back. And I like that very much. This night or this place of irresponsibility or a lack of response or a certain inability to get speech back from it. And I suspect this is the anti-Freudian night, the one in which you resist dreaming, the terrible banalization of the night as the place of dreams, which is a really unproductive relationship to night. Night itself seems to have been lost to us in many ways, in its own right, as a site that is taciturn. And I suppose I'd want to link that in some way back to Joe's possibility that, you talked about the illuminated stage, Joe?
Mm.
And what link there is between this taciturn night. I suppose you'd associate perhaps night with a sort of darkness that falls upon us, however that happens in some physical or mental form. And then the night or the darkness of an auditorium for 120 or 30 years, since the light was taken out of the auditorium in the 1870s or 60s, into which an illumination on the stage picks out, forces to speak, ventriloquizes an actor. Presumably the actor that Artaud and then Derrida was so concerned about being forced to speak within. And really, to finish the 10 minutes, these things here. These I suppose are ribs, or we sit in a supported architectural structure, which I suppose distinguishes this profoundly from a cave, in that you wouldn't expect a cave perhaps to have props. The word prop meaning the thing that supports the structure within which you're sitting. I mean, caves do have props now. Human beings put those props in to keep those places up and those sites up. But sitting in this space, which is a theatre where goods and services were given this conditioned, okay, the caves Joe's talking about are the caves that Marie-Josée Monzin would like us to think are the site of the construction of a figure that she would like to tell us about. A fantasy, Joe says, quite rightly. This is the term she used. And she wishes to construct, in a sense, an idea of the spectator in that site. But if Joe's talking about abandonment, too, a place of compassion and the construction the spectator suffered to allow to stay, it interests me that we're sitting in this place with props. Both obviously because the term prop has a theatrical pedigree as well as an architectural pedigree. But I'm wondering what kind of prop these are. I'm also imagining Joe, when I'm looking at Joe speaking to us in 50 years' time from this seat. Because in my head, the problem of present memory, which has begun to disintegrate, and when I look at Joe in that seat talking to us, I'm also imagining Joe speaking back in 50 years of now, of this present memory. Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Thank you. I'm feeling like in a swimming pool now. I have to. There are so many ideas to which I want to connect. But I was thinking that I will catch on the words which came up here. And this is especially abandonment. And something what you, Joe, said also, that the world that can carry out without them. So it's a kind of, for me, it's a very, I see a very interesting link to what I would like to talk about today, and I think it can correspond to what you also said. Especially something, what I would like to talk is not so much about the position of the spectator or spectatorship, but actually about the position of the artist, which I would say I would approach from a very similar, with a very similar notion of abandonment, of the repetition of compassion, and I would also add to that the repetition of difference, and I will explain why later. This is also somehow linked to the ideas with which I was very busy in the last 2 or 3 years. Actually, it's a kind of obsession which I would like to get rid of, but I can't. And that's the problem. So I am so much obsessed. I was really working a lot with politics and theater and conditions of the productions, and I'm really trying to get rid of that notion in the last year. And I can't. And I'm all the time even more into that. But of course, this kind of getting rid of it, of abandoning it, it's opening up to me another way of how to think about the problems. And the reason why I will talk about that things is also because actually last week I experienced really a very interesting paradox. I was invited to prepare a kind of residence, a kind of very open research situation for 3 months next year. And I proposed that I would like to deal with time, and especially what is the relation between time and artistic subjectivity. And now